He looked me in the eye. Then he turned away like I was already gone. They say trauma burns itself into the brain differently, that it doesn't play back in full scenes but in fragments like jagged film reels stuttering on a broken projector. For me, it wasn't the sharp smell of antiseptic or the glare of fluorescence that stayed. It was his eyes. Or rather, the absence in them. I don't remember the paramedics. I don't remember collapsing. All I know is when I blinked awake, the world was waterlogged and spinning. My heart was thudding so hard it made my fingers twitch. I tasted metal. There were muffled voices, too many white coats, and someone saying cardiac arrhythmia. Then came his voice. Not loud, not panicked, just cold. She always does this when her sister is upset. It's psychosomatic. I thought maybe I imagined it, that my brain, desperate for something familiar, conjured his tone. But no, he really said it. My father, Richard Quinn. In that sterile hallway, while my chest rose with wires taped across it and machines beeped warnings, he was already making excuses. Another voice snapped back. A nurse. Gnome Samantha. My sister. She was breathing fine before I told you I'm not okay. You're not listening to me. Through my haze, I saw her clinging to his arm like a child who lost her toy. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, black ribbons dripping onto her lavender hoodie. I watched from the gurney as Richard looked between us, the daughter attached to a monitor and the one throwing a tantrum under fluorescent lights. He looked me in the eye. Then he turned away. I need to take her outside, he said to no one in particular. She's having a meltdown. The word bounced around in my skull. Meltdown. Like a toddler denied candy. Like her spirals were more dangerous than my stammering heartbeat. The door slid shut behind them with a hydraulic hiss. At some point I must have closed my eyes again. Everything blurred into one long stretch of beeping nurses asking me to squeeze fingers, check lights, answer names. Time didn't move forward, it dissolved. When I stirred next, the room was darker, calmer. A nurse, older, warm eyes, was adjusting the saline drip beside me. Your father? She asked hesitantly, as if saying the word might hurt more than whatever was in my IV. I blinked. She offered a tight-lipped smile. He left. Said he'd come back after things settled down. I didn't speak. My mouth wouldn't cooperate, and even if it had, I didn't trust it. Not with this ache in my ribs, not the physical kind, but the hollowing out of something once whole. The nurse's voice lowered almost a whisper. I'm sorry, honey. You shouldn't have been alone. But I wasn't entirely. Pain kept me company. So did clarity. Because in that moment, under two white lights and the hum of machines, something crystallized inside me. A knowledge I could no longer ignore, no matter how many years I'd tried to dilute it with reason. They chose her. Again. Even when I couldn't breathe. I stared at the ceiling tiles. One of them had a brown water stain in the corner shaped like an arrow pointing west. I followed it with my eyes, not knowing why, just needing something else to focus on. Anything but the truth, pulsing under my skin. I was 28. Gainfully employed. Had never been arrested. Filed my own taxes since college. I visited home, called on holidays, remembered birthdays. I was the functional daughter. The quiet one. The one who never needed much. And none of it mattered. Not in the face of her chaos. She broke glass and they swept it up for her. I broke down and they walked away. It wasn't even the first time. Just the first time I couldn't unsee it. Somewhere between the hum of the vitals monitor and the soft shuffle of the nurse's sneakers, a decision took root in me. Not rage. Not revenge. Just a final severing. They may have made me, but they didn't get to break me. Not anymore. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't scream or beg or reach for my phone. I let the silence thicken. I let the realization anchor me. And when the nurse stepped out to check on another patient, I finally moved. My fingers fumbled along the edge of the side table until I found my phone. The screen was cracked probably from the fall, but still worked. I stared at the name. Camille. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 months. Not since she warned me that love wasn't a substitute for boundaries, that family could be blood and still be poison, that I needed to start building escape plans instead of excuses. I hit the call button. 2 rings. Then her voice smooth as glass and firm as steel. You have legal options, and it's time we use them. Some debts aren't about money, but some damn well are. The first thing I did when I got home from the hospital wasn't rest. It wasn't drink water or call a friend or even check the discharge instructions still crumpled in my coat pocket. It was open my laptop. It was 1:43 a.m. The apartment was dark except for the blinking amber light on my router. I didn't turn on the lamp. I wanted the glow from the screen to do the burning for me. Chrome opened automatically to my email. My fingers moved on their own, typing keywords tuition, rent, copay, credit card. It was like summoning ghosts. Each result hit like a tap on the bruise I'd been ignoring. A year ago, can you cover her fall semester shortfall? It's just $1,200. 2 years ago. Hey sis, Chase is threatening collections. Can you help me float dad's minimum again? 3 years ago. Sorry to ask, but I can't miss another therapy appointment. They don't take my insurance. Each one came with an apology brief scripted. None with a timeline for repayment. None with the word thanks. Camille once told me that gaslighting isn't always about making you question reality. Sometimes it's just making you feel guilty for noticing it. Back then, I thought she was being dramatic. I thought she didn't get it that family was different. But now, with the bitter weight of an ER discharge paper still crinkled in my coat, her words felt like the only thing that hadn't aged. I clicked over to my Venmo history. Years of transactions stacked like a house of cards, each one labeled in the blurriest language possible. Just until Friday. We'll explain later. Samantha in trouble again. Emergency dentist, love you. Mom would have wanted it. The last one made me pause. I scrolled back. Further. May 12, 2020. Funeral flowers from Samantha. $287.50. I blinked. My finger hovered over the tiny info bubble. It had come directly from my checking account. Samantha had asked me that morning, voice quivering, if I could please front the florist because her card was maxed, and she didn't want to look cheap at the memorial. I hadn't hesitated. Mom was barely in the ground. It felt like the least I could do. But I never got paid back. She never even picked up the arrangement. I had signed the card, not her. And somehow it still read, Love, Samantha. I closed the tab before the bile could reach my throat. Back in my inbox, I typed Camille. The search lit up with old threads, some work-related, most personal. The most recent was 6 months ago, subject line. This isn't generosity, it's extraction. In it, Camille had broken down what I didn't want to admit, how financial abuse hides behind family obligation. How chronic takers normalize your sacrifice until you forget what boundaries feel like. She'd attached a spreadsheet. I hadn't opened it back then. I did now. The document was clinical, color-coded, damning. Each line was a transaction, a sacrifice, a withdrawal I hadn't labeled as theft because I was trained not to. There was the $3,800 I paid to cover Samantha's failed internship in New York, which she quit after 3 weeks. The $5,600 for Richard's back taxes. The $9,200 in overlapping rents between Samantha's apartments after she fled bad roommates. Dozens of therapy copays, grocery transfers, cell phone bills, broken leases, pet deposit fees, airline tickets for family emergencies I was never included in. By the time I got to the bottom of the sheet, I was staring at a total $76, Rayo $42, not 1 cent returned. No repayments, no apologies, no acknowledgments. I had bankrolled 2 adults who called me rigid and too uptight for needing schedules and stability, who laughed at how serious I was, who forgot to invite me to dinners but remembered when rent was due. And the worst part? I had let them. Not because I was stupid, not even because I was kind, because I was trained to believe that self-sacrifice was love. I closed the spreadsheet. My head was pounding. The radiator hissed behind me, a soft reminder that winter was coming, and that every comfort in this apartment, the working heat, the fully stocked fridge, the linen sheets I saved up for, had been paid for, not just with my income, but with my silence. I stood up, walked to the drawer in the kitchen where I kept a battered folder labeled taxes. Inside were receipts I'd filed away out of habit, co-signed checks, donation letters, shared expenses I somehow covered alone. I flipped through them one by one. Some were faded. Some still smelled faintly of candle wax, probably from the church service for Mom. She used to say love means showing up. I had shown up to every crisis, every overdraft, every meltdown. I had been the scaffolding they leaned on when their own foundations gave out. And in return, they left me alone in an ER bed because she cried louder than I could breathe. I sat down, clutching the last receipt in my hand. It was small, barely legible now. The charge for the florist. I whispered to the room, or maybe just to myself. They erased me, one receipt at a time. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. If you want justice, don't ask for fairness. Ask for documentation. Camille's office was a cube of sharp lines and intentional coldness. The walls were off-white. The desk was black lacquered oak. One narrow window offered a sliver of Seattle skyline blurred slightly by the endless rain. Nothing personal lived in the room, no diplomas, no photos, not even a plant, only the quiet hum of power and preparation. She didn't greet me with small talk. No hug. No "how are you feeling?" Camille had never been one for soft landings. She nodded once as I sat across from her, then clicked her pen open and leaned back. "Start from where it hurts," she said. And so I did. I told her about the ER, about the wires on my chest, the nurse whispering he'd left, the receipt for flowers, the spreadsheet I finally opened. I told her everything. All 5 years of giving bending, swallowing rage like aspirin. And she didn't flinch once. She didn't interrupt, didn't nod excessively, didn't offer tissues. Camille simply listened the way only someone trained to turn pain into paperwork could. When I finally stopped my throat dry and raw, she didn't respond with pity or outrage. She closed her notebook. "Let's audit your life." Just like that. A paralegal, young, composed, quietly fierce, entered and handed Camille a folder thicker than I'd expected. My name was typed on the tab. Camille opened it and gestured for me to follow as she spread documents across the table like a forensic tarot reading. Email, Venmo, texts, photos, screenshots. All of it, she said. "You've already started gathering evidence, which means your instincts are better than you think. Now we systematize." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began dividing my life into categories: housing, education, medical, inheritance, emotional care, physical absence, financial dependence, coercion. "Wait," I interrupted, frowning. "Emotional care." Camille glanced at me over her glasses. "You didn't just fund their lives, Maddie. You emotionally subsidized them, coddled breakdowns, softened disappointments, explained away behaviors that would have gotten anyone else cut off. That's a form of labor. It matters." I stared at the paper, my heart thudding at how clinical she made it sound and how right she was. She clicked her pen again. "Do you currently have power of attorney assigned to either of them?" "Yes. My father." Since I was in college, joint accounts one with Samantha. She needed help with student loan payments. Camille's eyes narrowed. Did she use it to pay loans? I didn't answer. She pulled a fresh set of forms from her drawer and began drafting a revocation of power of attorney and a motion for removal from all joint financial agreements. The speed at which she moved was surgical. This won't erase what's been taken, she said, but it will stop the leak and create a formal trail in case you want to pursue restitution. Restitution, I echoed like I was tasting a new word. It felt foreign and thrilling and somehow inappropriate. Is that even possible? Camille shrugged. Morally, absolutely. Legally, we'll see. There was a knock on the door. The paralegal stepped in again, whispering something about a call from the district clerk. Camille waved her off without looking up. When the door shut, she leaned forward. This will get ugly. Are you sure you want to do this? I held her gaze. They already made it ugly. For a moment, her face softened. Then she gave me the closest thing to a smile she ever offered, a nod. Then let's stop being quiet. My chest tightened, not with fear but relief. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't holding the weight of it alone. That maybe I had an ally who wouldn't ghost me when things got hard. Camille turned her laptop toward me. We'll go in order of priority, but I want you to start by forwarding me any documents about your mother, particularly legal or financial. I hesitated. My stomach twisted. There was a folder I hadn't opened in years. One I'd archived out of some outdated sense of reverence or maybe guilt. Still, I nodded and opened my email. I scrolled and scrolled past layers of digital dust and outdated subscriptions until I found it. Subject line: Mom's original will. Dated 6 weeks before her diagnosis. I clicked. They never owed me love, but they do owe me math. The glow from my laptop was the only light in the room, casting long shadows against the walls. Outside, the city moved on muted car horns, the low hum of a bus, shifting gears, the distant hiss of late-night rain. But in my apartment, time had folded in on itself. There was only one date that mattered now. 5 years, $76,000. Zero apologies. I took a sip of cold tea and opened the spreadsheet again. Camille was right, it wasn't generosity. It was extraction. The difference sat in the rows, line by line, dollar by dollar, each transfer as intimate as a scar. Date, recipient, amount, purpose, emotional context. That last column had been Camille's idea. Not just why the money was sent, but how it was taken. The guilt trips, the silent expectations, the just this once please that became rituals. October 15, 2019. Samantha, $180. Therapy copay. She said her new therapist wouldn't see her again unless the bill was cleared. Cried over the phone. I left work early to transfer it. July 3, 2020. Richard, $600, credit card minimum. He said he was too proud to ask Samantha. I took it as a compliment. January 8, 2021. Samantha, $1,250 housing deposit. She said she'd finally found a stable place. Said she was starting over. That made it sound noble. The list stretched past 50 entries. Some were small, under $100. Others made my jaw tighten when I reread them. A few had notes in all caps, never paid back, but most didn't. Back then, I never even thought to expect repayment. I thought I was being good, responsible, reliable. I opened my audio archive and typed his name, Richard Quinn. Only 2 files came up. One was a saved voicemail from 2022, the other a clipped voice note he'd sent me when I offered to help with Samantha's tuition shortfall. I hit play. You've always been the reliable one, Maddie. That's what I love about you. I don't worry when it's you. You just handle things. There was a warmth to his voice, that practiced paternal calm that had once reassured me. But tonight it scraped like sandpaper across my skin. I replayed it. Again and again. You've always been the reliable one. Behind the compliment was a command, and behind the command was a cage. One I had lived in so long I'd mistaken it for a personality trait. Reliable. The word had cost me over $70,000. I highlighted the entire spreadsheet and applied a gray background. It made it look official, like a document a lawyer might present in court. The weight of it made me sit up straighter. Then, in cell A1, I typed a title, Evidence, Phase 1. I stared at it for a while. It didn't feel vindictive. It felt accurate, necessary, clean. A knock from the pipes behind the kitchen wall reminded me how late it was. My tea had gone bitter. My hands ached from typing. Still, I wasn't done. I opened Google Drive and created a new folder. If something happens to me. Not because I expected drama, not because I was paranoid, but because when you grow up learning to minimize everything, your needs, your pain, your boundaries, you don't leave things to chance anymore. I dragged the spreadsheet into the folder and clicked upload. The progress bar filled slowly, the file pulsing blue and white. 76,000. Not a penny repaid. Not a single thank you. But this time I didn't feel hollow. I felt awake. I had been cast as the dependable daughter, the emotional janitor, the one who mopped up messes she didn't make. But now I was the historian, the auditor, the documentarian of damage no one else had the decency to name. And I had receipts. It wasn't just money. They used my signature like it was theirs. The paper didn't look sinister. Camille slid it across the table like she was offering a menu, not an indictment. My name was at the top, printed neatly in black ink. I'd seen it 100 times. On leases, tax forms, credit card agreements. But I had never seen this one. Do you recognize that? Camille asked. I didn't touch it. I scanned the lines, my eyes snagging on keywords: federal loan disclosure, cosigner, promissory note. At the bottom, in a digital scrawl that mimicked mine just closely enough to pass at a glance, Maddie Quinn. I never signed this, I said. Camille didn't blink. I didn't think you had. I swallowed hard. Is this even legal? Legal. She let out a sharp breath. No. Believable, yes. At least until someone challenges it. Which we're about to. She reached for a folder already half full of documents, each one a thread pulled from the sweater of my life. Inside, receipts, screenshots, emails, and now this. I finally picked up the loan document, turning it over like it might bite me. How long? The loan was disbursed 4 years ago. Samantha's junior year, Camille said. The payments are being deferred, of course, but the debt is real. And guess whose credit it's tied to? I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out the window. Rain had started again, tracing thin lines down the glass like someone trying to etch their own escape route. I wondered how many times I'd smiled at Samantha that year, called her brave for finishing school, congratulated her on being independent. How many times I'd said yes, without ever being asked. Camille opened a new tab on her laptop and pulled up another document, this one a medical authorization form. This is from 3 years ago, she said. Outpatient therapy. Billing address your apartment. Insurance yours. Authorization to treat signed by you. She rotated the screen toward me. Another signature. Mine. Sort of. But this one had a drag to it, like it had been lifted. Scanned, pasted. The kind of imperfection that only stands out when you're looking for it. I didn't sign that either, I whispered. No, Camille said softly. But someone needed a name. And yours is the one they reach for. My stomach turned. It wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't just being the emotional crutch, the human ATM. They hadn't just taken my time or my forgiveness or my willingness to believe the best in them. They'd taken me, my identity, my signature, my yes, without ever hearing it out loud. Camille was already moving again. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing up a rescission notice and a formal identity misuse affidavit. She paused only once to look me in the eye. "This isn't family drama, Maddie. This is identity misuse. What they did, it has legal consequences. If we go forward, it doesn't stay in the realm of hurt feelings or bad boundaries. We're talking fraud, forgery, coercion." I nodded slowly, my breath catching. All those years being told I was too dramatic, too rigid, too serious. Turns out I wasn't any of those things. I was right. I was the only adult in the room. And that's exactly why they targeted me. Reliable, trustworthy, invisible. Camille printed the documents, stacking them neatly as if they were weapons, and, in a way, they were. Paper-thin knives, sharp enough to sever me from the narrative I'd been trapped in since my mother's funeral. She slid the first rescission form toward me. "You ready to stop surviving and start reclaiming?" I didn't hesitate this time. Print everything. I thought I had lost her when she died. I didn't realize I lost her long before that to them. The basement of Camille's office didn't match the precision of the floors above. It smelled like cardboard and time. Boxes lined the metal shelves labeled in black Sharpie with legal codes, surnames, and years. Some were yellowed with age. Others looked like they hadn't been opened since the day they were sealed. Camille's paralegal Jamie led us to a corner shelf marked Quinn Estate, 2017-2018. She pulled down 3 boxes, stacked them on a rolling cart, and disappeared without a word. The moment she was gone, Camille exhaled not frustration, but readiness. A slow exhale before impact. She kept everything Camille said as she opened the first box. Inside were manila folders, each labeled in my mother's handwriting. Maddie, school. Samantha, therapy. Richard, pension. Each folder had its own set of documents arranged in an order only she could have understood. Camille opened the one marked Maddie, school, and out, slipped a photo of me in a cap and gown taped to a post-it note that read, "My North Star." I looked away. We kept going. Folder after folder. Then finally, at the bottom of the second box, Camille found what she didn't know she was looking for. It was a binder, old and floral, the kind you'd expect to find on the shelf of a woman who still sent handwritten thank you notes. Inside, pages of lined stationery in blue ink. My mother's handwriting. Slanted, elegant, unmistakably hers. At the front was a note in block letters, "Do not file. For Maddie only if I'm gone." Camille looked at me for permission. I nodded. She flipped the pages slowly. The first letter was dated June 5th, 2017. My Maddie. "If you're reading this, I'm already gone. But I need you to know I saw everything. Not all at once, but piece by piece, the way women learn to notice things they wish they hadn't." The letter went on for 3 pages. My mother wrote about how often I had been overlooked, how many times she watched me take the back seat to Samantha's noise, Richard's ego, and the endless drama that seemed to orbit around everyone but me. She had planned to leave me the condo, the small savings account she'd built over 20 years, even her jewelry. But then, in a later letter, dated just 1 week before she was hospitalized, the tone shifted. "If Richard disagrees, let this serve as my voice. I want you to have the condo. You are the one who made it a home when I was too tired. You paid the bills without being asked. You stayed present when everyone else vanished." My throat tightened as Camille turned the page, and then we saw it. A notarized document stapled to the back. Official looking. Filed. Executed. But the date didn't match. August 14, 2018, Camille read aloud. That's 6 days after her death certificate. She pulled the page closer, examining the notary seal. And this signature, it's hers. But the ink's too dark, like it was scanned and printed, or reused. A cold chill bloomed in my spine. "They used her too," I whispered. Camille nodded grimly. "This wasn't just about sidelining you. It was about removing you. As if your mother's intentions didn't matter. As if you didn't. I couldn't speak. My fingers trembled as I touched the edge of the binder. I thought I had lost her when she died, but now I understood I lost her to them long before that. Piece by piece. Decision by decision. My mother had written me into her legacy with care, and they'd erased her handwriting with bureaucracy and forged timelines. Camille pulled out her phone and took photos of the letters the binder the forged will. She worked silently, methodically, like a surgeon removing a tumor too dangerous to leave untouched. These letters, she said, they don't just contradict the official will, they obliterate it. I looked at the final page again. My mother's words stared back at me, quiet but unrelenting. You have always deserved more than silence. If they try to bury your name, I hope these words help you dig it back up. Camille placed the letters gently into a new folder, labeling it Supplemental Evidence, Estate Challenge. Then she looked at me, her expression harder than before. We're not just fighting for your money, she said. We're fighting for your mother's last word. And that's when I felt it. The shift. This wasn't grief anymore. It was a reckoning. Some ties don't need cutting. They need burning. It was still dark when I woke, the kind of dark that presses against the windows like it's trying to remind you of everything you don't want to face. No alarm. No noise. Just the low hum of my refrigerator and the ache in my spine that had taken up permanent residence these past few months. I didn't turn on music. No distractions. Just coffee. One mug black. No sugar. I needed the bitterness. At the kitchen table, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked in a blank document, waiting like it somehow knew today wouldn't end quietly. Subject line: rescission and revocation of all legal and financial ties. I typed the salutation twice before deleting it. Dear Richard felt too formal. Dad felt like a lie. I settled on nothing. Just the body. Effective immediately, I revoke all previously granted power of attorney authorizations, financial permissions, and emergency contact designations associated with my name. This includes, but is not limited to, medical authorizations, credit accounts, student loans, and co-signed legal agreements. Additionally, I withdraw my participation and consent from all joint accounts, financial instruments, or liabilities where my name was used with or without my knowledge. You may no longer speak for me. You never truly did. The words weren't angry. They were clean, sterile, like a surgical incision, not designed to wound, just to separate. I copied Camille on the draft and hit send. My phone buzzed 2 minutes later. Camille's voice came through the speaker, steady and sharp. Perfect. I'll forward the notices to the banks and file with the county clerk. You're officially untethered. Not yet, I said. Not until I deliver the physical copy. A pause. You sure? Yes. She didn't argue. She knew better than anyone I'd spent years being polite, invisible, tolerable. This wasn't a gesture. It was a funeral. For a version of me that had been too scared to say no. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, I was parked outside the house I used to call home. The mailbox stood at the edge of the driveway, chipped at the corners but still upright, much like the man who lived inside. I stepped out of the car with the letter in my hand, folded precisely into thirds, sealed in a plain white envelope. No return address, just his name. My heart beat once, then again. Slower this time. I opened the mailbox and placed the letter inside. Done. As I turned to leave, I caught a flash of movement in the rearview mirror. A silver sedan parked across the street. Engine off. Windows up. The silhouette in the driver's seat barely moved, but I recognized the shape instantly. Samantha. Her face was unreadable. Her eyes locked on mine like she was trying to measure the weight of what had just happened. Maybe she'd been there all night. Maybe she was hoping for a confrontation. But she didn't step out. She didn't wave. Just sat there like a statue carved from guilt and resentment. I didn't give her more than a glance. Whatever she came to witness, she had seen it. I got back in my car, shut the door with a quiet finality, and drove away, not fast, not triumphant. Just done. The silence inside me wasn't empty. It was clean. They always assumed I wouldn't say anything. That's the only reason they got bold. Camille's office was unusually quiet today, not somber, strategic. The kind of silence you needed when preparing for war. A war of documents, not bullets, but no less lethal. She sat across from me with her reading glasses pushed low on her nose, eyes scanning a freshly delivered envelope. Therapist testimony, she murmured. Samantha's from 2019. I sipped the coffee she'd handed me and waited. I didn't need to read it myself. Camille would tell me what mattered. She had a pattern, she said, finally lifting her gaze. Manipulation of caregivers' cycles of crisis followed by emotional withdrawal. The language is clinical, but the implication is clear. Samantha made people responsible for her well-being and punished them for it. That tracks, I said dryly. Camille handed over the pages. The therapist had chosen words carefully, but the message bled through. This wasn't just a difficult patient, this was a person who exploited empathy like it was currency. Reading it, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt exhausted. Every sentence was a mirror I'd already stood in front of for years. She filed this with an ethics board, Camille said. It was never made public, but now it's on record. My phone buzzed with a notification not from Camille's server, but a name I hadn't seen in years. Julia Whitmore. I opened the message. Hey, Maddie. This is probably years overdue, but I just saw Samantha's name in a comment thread and I thought about you. I haven't forgotten anything. Just didn't know I was allowed to say it out loud. Let me know if you ever want to talk, or if you need someone to say it in writing. I stared at the screen, heart thudding louder than I expected. Julia, my college roommate, the only person who had seen the edges of my family dynamic and asked hard questions. She'd distanced herself after graduation after a particularly chaotic weekend where Samantha had shown up uninvited, drunk, and manipulative. Julia never said why she stopped calling. She just disappeared. Now I knew why. She hadn't known how to stay without being dragged into the storm. I typed back. I remember everything too. I could really use your memory now, especially the kind that would hold up in court. She replied almost immediately. Then I'll say what I should have said years ago. She lied. She made you clean up every mess. And I was a coward for not standing beside you then. Camille peeked over my shoulder, reading. This, she said, is better than evidence. It's human context. We spent the next hour drafting an affidavit request for Julia. Camille prepared a motion to include the therapist's statement, Julia's upcoming testimony, and the full documentation of my financial support receipts, messages, Venmo logs into a formal filing. I watched her type, relentless and focused. Camille was not the kind of woman who raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her precision was louder than anger. Their boldness was only possible because you stayed quiet, she said without looking up. Silence was your currency. You're bankrupting them now. I nodded. There wasn't much left to say. By 3 p.m., Camille's assistant had filed the first wave of documents to the court. I watched the confirmation email hit my inbox. A long list of attachments. Financial misuse. Identity violation. Witness statements. Therapist letter. Each file was a piece of my voice finally amplified. I went home early, emotionally threadbare. The sun was setting in burnt streaks across the sky when I checked my phone again. This time, it wasn't Julia. It was Samantha. Or rather, Samantha's social media feed. A new post. Public. No image, just words. Be careful who you trust. Some sisters are born jealous. No tags, no names. But I didn't need them. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. Controlled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. If you line the receipts up, they tell a story. Mine told a lie, and I didn't write it. The whiteboard in Camille's office had become a battlefield. Post-it notes, printed emails, annotated bank statements, all layered like archaeological strata. Colored markers outlined date ranges. Arrows connected events to text messages. A spreadsheet scrolled endlessly on the monitor beside her desk, cells neatly color-coded by relevance green for verified yellow, for suspicious red for impossible. We stood in silence, reviewing what now looked less like accounting and more like a confession, one they didn't realize they'd written. This, Camille said, pointing to a pink sticky note labeled POA Request 11/2021, was signed while you were in inpatient recovery for that arrhythmia scare. Right. Yes. I didn't flinch anymore when we hit these dates. They'd become data points, not trauma. Then it's invalid. You weren't in cognitive shape to consent. Camille's intern, a soft-spoken grad student named Eli, clicked something on his laptop. Also this transfer, he said. It was made at 2:14 a.m. while your phone was logged in from an IP address in Tokyo. I was in Japan for work that week, I confirmed. Definitely not co-signing anything at 2 a.m. Camille raised an eyebrow. And yet, somehow your signature showed up on a loan application for Samantha's outpatient treatment. I almost laughed, but it came out as breath. Thin, humorless. They got lazy. No, Camille said. They got comfortable. I stepped closer to the board. All the dates bled together: birthdays, hospital stays, rent payments, credit card minimums. But patterns emerged. The loans were always clustered around Samantha's crises. The requests for temporary use of my credit always followed a silence from my father, like it was a punishment for not being more available. Here, Camille said, circling a Venmo note with a red pen. Read this one. It was from December 2020, the memo line for her from both of us. I didn't recognize the recipient. I never approved this, I whispered. I don't even know who that is. Camille nodded. But it's from your account, and your name is attached. The phrasing implies joint consent. From both of us, I repeated. Like I agreed. That she said is fraud by implication. And that's not even the worst of it. She clicked to the next page on her screen, an email chain from Richard to a financial advisor. Subject line: Family Trust Realignment. For Samantha's long-term stability. The email proposed reallocating remaining trust funds left by my mother toward the more emotionally vulnerable daughter whose care is more unpredictable. I recognized the attachment. It was the same trust paperwork I had once signed, except this version was edited. My initials had been inserted at the bottom corner, a different font, a scan job. I stared at it for a long time. Eli cleared his throat. The metadata confirms this document was altered post-signature. The version you signed didn't include that paragraph. Of course it didn't, I said. Camille clicked her pen shut. We can file for a forensic audit and signature verification. It won't be instant, but it'll hold in court. She paused, then looked at me directly. You okay? No, I said. But I'm ready. She gave a small nod and stepped away from the board. We all stared at the timeline again, not as a list of offenses, but as a structure. It was architecture now. The scaffolding of what would become our legal case. Every payment, every forged form, every casual theft of identity, not random, calculated. And the math told the truth. Camille reached for the folder marked Initial Filing. Her fingers brushed its corner, but she didn't pick it up just yet. You want war? She said, eyes still on the board. Let's show them our terms. They wanted me quiet. So they gave me the silent treatment. Perfect. There was something ceremonial about opening a blank post window. Like sharpening a knife slowly, not to stab, but to carve a boundary deep enough that no one could step over it by mistake. I sat on my couch laptop, opened the only sound, the low hum of my fridge in the background. The air in the room felt heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The cursor blinked, impatient. My fingers hovered over the keys. They wanted me to disappear. They thought silence would shame me into obedience again. That if Samantha posted just vague enough, and Richard didn't respond at all, I'd crumble under the weight of ambiguity and keep carrying their secrets like family heirlooms. Instead, I gave them exactly what they were asking for. My silence broken. The first sentence took shape carefully. I've debated posting this for a long time, but silence only protects the wrong people. From there, it flowed. Clean, precise. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse. I told my story the way someone might testify to the weather-observant, unflinching cold. For years, I believed loyalty meant self-erasure. That love required sacrifice. I believed that if I kept showing up, they'd eventually see me. But I've learned that love without reciprocity is just compliance dressed up as virtue. I included facts. Only facts. Financial support. Medical emergencies. A grave. This is not about revenge. It's about stopping the harm. This is my line. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then added the photo. It was from last fall. I was standing in front of my mother's grave. It wasn't posed or dramatic. I'd been caught mid-breath, eyes closed, one hand resting on the tombstone, the moment before grief tips into sobbing. I pressed post. It was out. For a second, the room felt too still. Then the screen refreshed. Notifications lit up like sparks on dry tinder. Camille called almost instantly. You did it. I did. Do you want to mute your phone for a few hours? I want to know who shows up. Some did. Cousins I hadn't heard from since the funeral reacted with hearts or quiet affirmations. A few DM'd simple words like, proud of you or thank you. Others ignored it altogether, predictable silence. But the pushback wasn't far behind. An aunt posted on her own feed, air your laundry in the backyard, not the front porch. Someone else commented, so dramatic. It's just family stuff. And then came the vague Facebook post from Richard himself. Some people will rewrite history when they can't bear to look in the mirror. I didn't respond. Camille texted me, their discomfort is not your burden. And I believed her. I shut the laptop for a while, let the notifications roll on in the background while I sat in the dark with only my own breath to listen to. No apologies, no explanations, no expectations. Later that night, a new message appeared in my inbox. It was from my cousin Caroline, someone I'd admired as a kid, but hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years. Her name made my throat tighten. I always knew. I was afraid. I'm not anymore. I stared at it, hands trembling slightly. Not because of the words, but because of the shift. The quiet ripple of someone saying me too before I even asked. I exhaled. Hope like steam rising from a long-sealed place inside. Then came the knock. 3 firm clinical raps at the door. I opened it to a courier in a navy jacket holding a manila envelope. Maddie Quinn. Yes. You've been served. He handed it over and walked away without another word. The envelope was thick. My name typed neatly across the front. Inside, bold and unmistakable, cease and desist. From Richard Quinn's attorney. It wasn't a courtroom. It was a stage. And they'd been rehearsing their lines for years. The walls were off-white, the kind that tried too hard to be neutral and ended up feeling like stale breath. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, humming just loud enough to make silence feel like accusation. I sat at one end of the long oak table, Camille beside me in a charcoal blazer sharp enough to cut glass. Across from us, Richard adjusted his cuffs like he was preparing to sell a house, not explain years of quiet theft. Samantha kept her eyes low, as if feigning meekness might once again work in her favor. Their attorney, a stiff-jawed man named Gilmore, had the bored detachment of someone used to protecting people with too much money and too little truth. The mediator, a woman named Teresa Hall, cleared her throat. Let's begin. Camille's voice was calm, clinical. This mediation concerns a pattern of financial exploitation, document fraud, and misuse of authority by the respondents Richard and Samantha Quinn against my client, Maddie Quinn. Gilmore waved a dismissive hand. We dispute that language entirely. What we have is a family disagreement, not a fraud case. Disagreement implies both parties had equal power, Camille replied coolly. Maddie had none. Richard leaned forward. I think we've lost perspective here. My daughter's been under stress. Health issues, I understand. But to bring lawyers into family matters, family didn't leave me on the ER table, I said. My voice was steady, not loud, but it cut through his sentence like a scalpel. Samantha finally looked up. Her eyes shimmered like they always had when she wanted sympathy. I was having a breakdown. That night wasn't about you. It never is, I said. The mediator held up her hand. Let's return to the documentation. Camille slid a folder across the table. Exhibit a co-signed student loan forms signed using a digital scan of Maddie's signature with no accompanying consent forms. Gilmore barely looked. That's standard in some families. Convenience. Forgery, Camille corrected. Exhibit B, she continued, shows credit card charges made from Maddie's account paid to Samantha's therapist over a 2-year period totaling over $9,000. Maddie was not in therapy. She was unaware of the charges. Richard shifted in his chair. We managed her accounts for convenience. She was always busy. Busy being your safety net, I snapped, not your scapegoat. The mediator scribbled something. Then Camille produced the USB drive. This is a recorded phone call between Mr. Quinn and Maddie dated July 14th. You'll hear him confirm that he used Maddie's credit to cover Samantha's medical expenses. Gilmore stiffened. Is this legally admissible? It's not a courtroom, Camille said. Just a stage. Remember, the audio played. My father's voice filled the sterile room. She needed the therapy, Maddie. What was I supposed to do? You weren't using the money, it was just sitting there. Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Samantha scoffed. You always make yourself the victim. The mediator looked up sharply. Thank you. That will be noted. Camille pressed pause on the recording. This isn't about vengeance. This is about restoration. Recognition. My client is not seeking punishment. She's seeking the truth in writing. My hands were folded. Calm. Years of begging had hardened into something steelier. The mediator took a slow breath, scanning the file again. Then finally she said the words I'd waited weeks to hear. We may need to escalate this beyond mediation. The last thing she wrote wasn't for them. It was for me. They just buried it with her. The room felt colder the second day. Same table, same bland decor, same mediator, but the air buzzed with a different kind of electricity. No more pleasantries, no more restraint. Camille walked in ahead of me, crisp, unreadable. In her hands, a leather folder sealed with red string. Richard glanced at it and immediately straightened his posture. Samantha shifted in her seat, nervous in a way that didn't quite match her usual drama. She was quiet today. That was worse. Camille placed the folder on the table like it was loaded. Before we begin, she said, her tone flat, my client would like to submit additional documentation previously undisclosed and recently validated. The mediator raised an eyebrow. Go on? Camille untied the folder and withdrew a stack of aged envelopes still intact, some yellowing at the edges. Each bore the same careful handwriting. My mother's. These are handwritten letters from Elaine Quinn. Camille continued. Dated between 2016 and 2018. They were stored with legal archives under attorney-client privilege, not accessed until this month. Samantha leaned forward. That's impossible. She never wrote those? She did, I said. Camille handed the mediator one of the letters already encased in a transparent sleeve. This one, dated June 12, 2017, reads, and I quote, If I am not alive to say this, my condo belongs to Maddie. I have discussed this with Richard. He may not agree. Let this letter serve as my voice. Richard's jaw clenched. Gilmore leaned in. We dispute the authenticity. It's her handwriting, I said. You want proof? We have it. Camille nodded to her paralegal, who slid forward a forensic analysis, matched strokes, signature validation, ink age estimates. The mediator took her time examining the pages one by one. Richard finally broke the silence. She changed her mind. That's why we updated the will. Camille didn't flinch. Ah, the updated will. She opened a separate folder and pulled out a copy. This version was allegedly signed October 20th, 2022. Yes, Richard said quickly. We met with her that week. She wanted to. She died on October 14th, Camille said almost gently. The silence hit like a dropped glass. Richard blinked. There's some mistake. No. The mistake was thinking no one would check. Samantha paled. You're lying. The death certificate is public record, Camille replied, sliding it across the table. Signed by the attending physician. Time of death 9:14 p.m., October 14th. The mediator stared at the will. You're alleging a forged legal document submitted for probate. I'm not alleging it, Camille said. I'm confirming it. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands trembled slightly. Samantha pulled her sleeves over her wrists like she was cold, but she wasn't shaking from temperature. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My mother already had. The room was so still I could hear the scratch of the mediator's pen against her notepad. Then she looked up, voice tight but measured. This will move to formal hearing. And possible investigation. They thought they inherited everything. Turns out they inherited the consequences. I hadn't planned to check the news. But Camille did. And when she forwarded me the article with only 3 words, they leaked it, my hands went cold. A local blog had posted the headline in bold: daughter disinherited, family feud over forged will. Beneath it, blurry scans of the 2 wills, one typed, one handwritten. The typed one dated weeks after my mother's recorded date of death. The handwriting hers. Unmistakable. The post didn't name me directly, but anyone who had been at the funeral or followed Samantha's prolific online life could connect the dots. Especially when a commenter dropped, "Wasn't the younger daughter the one who paid for the flowers?" Wild. The phone calls came in waves. Extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. First polite curiosity, then quiet outrage. My Aunt Doreen whispered over the line, "I thought you'd cut ties." I didn't know why, but now. She paused. "If you need a witness to Richard's ways, I'm available." The cracks were no longer private, they were public. And they were spreading. Camille kept me grounded. Her voice was steady through the storm. The district attorney called back, she said. They're reviewing the will as part of a potential forgery case. It's not just civil anymore. I had to sit down. Meanwhile, Samantha, true to form, lashed out. She didn't mention me by name. She didn't have to. Her followers knew the subtext. It's disgusting how people use grief for attention. Especially sisters who think the world owes them everything. But this time, something shifted. Julia posted a public reply. The post wasn't long, but it landed like a hammer. I believed Samantha once. I don't anymore. Maddie deserves better. And she's not alone. It went semi-viral in our small circle. Former friends liked it. A few even reposted. I hadn't realized how many people were watching, just waiting for permission to stop pretending. Even Samantha's therapist quietly removed her name from the client success stories on their website. One of Richard's longtime donors issued a public statement, "We stand for integrity. All affiliations are under review." Camille told me it would come to this. She just didn't know how fast. They built their image on silence, she said. Now that you've broken yours, they're the ones scrambling to explain. It should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow, like I'd won a war no one should have had to fight. That night, as I folded laundry in the quiet of my apartment, there was a knock at my door. Not loud, just certain. No one stood there. Only an envelope. No return address. Handwritten. My name. In his handwriting. Maddie. Not all victories come with applause. Some arrive in the sound of doors closing behind you. The courtroom was silent, not the grand kind you see on television, but the sterile hush of a legal chamber where real lives are quietly dissected. No cameras, no audience. Just four people and a verdict that had already begun echoing before it was read aloud. I sat on the left, Camille beside me, her posture calm but razor-edged. Across from us, Richard's attorney shuffled papers with forced confidence. Richard himself wasn't there. Neither was Samantha. Apparently, the truth was too heavy for in-person attendance. The judge, an older woman with glasses perched at the edge of her nose, cleared her throat and began reading from a document. Her voice was calm, clinical, detached in a way that made the gravity of her words hit harder. In the matter of Quinn v. Quinn, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Madeline Quinn, on all civil counts. My ears rang, not from the words, but from the silence that followed. No gasps, no objections, no gavel slam. Just a pause. Camille reached over and gently tapped the edge of the legal pad in front of me. I looked down and realized my hand had been clenched around the pen so tightly it left a red imprint along my palm. The court awards full ownership of the property located on East Haven Terrace. To the plaintiff, the judge continued. Additionally, all documents previously filed under joint financial authority have been voided and responsibility for damages in the amount of $76,000 is assigned jointly to the defendants. I exhaled through my nose. Quiet justice. Sharp. Clean. Camille leaned toward me and whispered, "We won." Quietly but completely. The judge looked up. "Do you have anything to add before I finalize the ruling, Ms. Quinn?" I stood. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Only this, I don't want the damages. I won't take a cent of their hush money." The judge tilted her head. "That is your right. I'll accept the property," I added, "because it was mine in the first place. But the rest, let them keep the silence they tried to buy me with. I don't need it anymore." There was a long pause, and for a moment I saw the faintest glimmer of something in the judge's eyes. Not sympathy exactly. Something older. Like recognition. Noted for the record. She signed the page. One stroke of a pen and 5 years of being erased had just been undone. As Camille gathered our things, I took one last look around the room. The ceiling tiles, the state seal on the wall, the chairs no one filled. I had imagined this moment 1,000 ways, most of them loud, angry, vengeful. Instead, it was quiet. Final. We stepped into the hallway. I expected the air to feel lighter, but it didn't. Not quite. Closure doesn't sweep in like a movie ending. It's slower. It hums beneath your skin and rises slowly over time. Outside the building, the Seattle sky hung low and gray like it always did in November. I tightened my coat and followed Camille toward the exit, and then I saw her, Julia, standing just beyond the security gates holding a bouquet of irises and lavender. I blinked. "Are those?" She nodded. "From your mom's garden." I called the new owners. Told them why I needed them. I took the flowers. My throat tightened. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," she said. "Your mother wanted you to have something beautiful today." We stood in silence, the kind that says everything without trying. Inside the courthouse, justice had been served on paper. But out here in the real world, something quieter bloomed. Not revenge, not even relief, just the start of peace. Freedom doesn't feel like a scream. It feels like not needing to explain anymore. The floor was cold under my feet, but not unfamiliar. I walked slowly through the condo, my condo now, with nothing but the hum of early morning and the soft click of my steps echoing down the hallway. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. It was that in-between time when the world feels paused, like it's waiting to see who you'll become next. I didn't rush. I touched the walls, opened every drawer, pulled open the curtains that had been drawn for years. The light spilled across the living room, catching specks of dust in the air like glitter. It felt holy. It felt earned. The furniture was still old, still mismatched echoes of a family I no longer belonged to. I made a mental list: donation, trash, maybe burn. But the locks were first. The locksmith came at 7. He didn't ask why I wanted new keys, just nodded when I handed him the old ones and said, "All of them." When he was done, I stood with the new key in my palm. It wasn't symbolic. It was survival. I threw the old keys into the trash with a force that surprised me. Julia arrived a little after 8, carrying 2 gallons of paint and 2 iced coffees. "You ready to turn this trauma capsule into an actual home?" she asked, grinning. I laughed. God, yes. We started with the living room wall, the one we used to sit against during high school sleepovers when Samantha would throw fits, and I'd pretend to be fine. Julia painted in long, sweeping strokes. I took the corners. We didn't talk about the trial, or Richard, or Samantha. We talked about a guy in 10th grade who thought we were witches, about that road trip we never took, about what forgiveness feels like when you stop asking for it. At one point, my phone buzzed. A voice note from Camille. I stepped into the kitchen to listen. Her voice was low, steady. "You made this happen. Not the court. Not me. You. Don't let them ever rewrite it. This is your version. Hold the pen tight." I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because for the first time the emotion didn't leak out sideways. It stayed steady like a current I finally knew how to swim in. Later, after Julia left, I stood in the hallway with one last thing to do. I held the letter in both hands, my mother's handwriting, her last real voice. I'd already had it framed wood, simple glass without glare. I hung it on the hallway wall right at eye level, not in the living room where guests could see, not in a bedroom where I'd forget it was there. Right in the middle of the path between rooms. A reminder every day that she tried to protect me, even if no one else let her. The final click of the frame settling into place sounded like punctuation. And for the first time, the house felt like mine. Not just legally, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mine. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, new locks on the door, no one else on the deed, and no invisible strings tied to my spine. And that's when the message came in. Unknown number. Just a name, Rachel. If you're ever ready to write a book, I think we all need it. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together.